right, let's touch on B4, identifying and distinguishing between positive and negative reinforcement. So first, let's just quickly go over what is reinforcement. Reinforcement, to put into simple terms, is just adding or taking away from something to increase a behavior. So if it's reinforcement, it's increasing a behavior. This can mean many different things, and we'll go ahead and discuss this. So the number one principle and major part of most behavior change procedures is reinforcement contingencies. This is defined as a stimulus change, like I said, that follows a behavior that results in that behavior occurring more often in the future, right? So it's gonna keep continuing. This can either be an organic process that is defined by an observed increase in a behavior following a specific consequence. For example, like after eating her first delicious Girl Scouts cookie, Kirsten immediately ate another one, right? Or it could be a procedure of applying a specific consequence to deliberately increase the occurrence of the target behavior. So let's see, for example, to increase Michael's on-task behavior, his teacher gives him a token each minute that he is able to stay engaged in an academic tabletop activity. And the duration of on-task behavior increases. So that token that he was receiving for the on-task behavior has increased more on-task behavior. Reinforcement depends on motivation, right? MOs, or motivation, alter the current value of stimulus changes as reinforcement. If you're not interested in tokens, that's not gonna increase your behavior, right? If you don't care about how many tokens you get, you're not going to continue doing that behavior. So always be thinking about, is this person actually motivated for this reinforcement? So for example, really quick, Faith will only hold a cup of water under the faucet tab when she is thirsty, right? She doesn't need to fill up a water cup if she's not thirsty. So if there's no motivation for it, you're not going to increase that behavior. Be cautious, really quick, about the immediacy of a reinforcer, right? If you're trying to really increase this behavior and you know this reinforcer is actually motivating to them, that needs to be quick, okay? Think temporal relation. A response becomes more frequent in the future if previously followed by a reinforcer or an increase in a reinforcer within 0 to 3 seconds. It needs to be fast. Delayed consequences aren't technically reinforcement, but they can still influence behavior. For example, rule-governed behavior. It is important to get it out fast, and then you'll work towards in the future, fading that immediacy out. But at the beginning, when you're really trying to teach that behavior and you're really trying to make it stick, quick reinforcement is the key. What does reinforcement do? It makes antecedent and stimulus conditions relevant. It promotes stimulus control by making responding in the presence of the SD more likely, and not in the presence of an S delta. It increases future responding. It maintains behavior that is already occurring. Think that intermittent reinforcement. If a consequence causes the behavior to continue in the same way, this is also reinforcement. For example, when Michael is thirsty and sees a water fountain, he drinks water from the fountain. This relieves his thirst, so he continues to drink water if he sees a fountain when he is thirsty. When he is thirsty is a big key here, right? Remember, he's not going to go to the water fountain if he's not thirsty. He's not motivated for it, but he will continue to go to that water fountain when he's thirsty. He's now learning that behavior and getting reinforced from it because that helps his thirst. I know we're really breaking this down, but I think it's important. On test questions, look for an increase in behavior. Otherwise, it's not a reinforcement contingency. So if the test question, even if you can sit there and assume, oh, maybe this will influence behavior, do not assume. only if it is stating the behavior is increasing, then it can be considered reinforcement. All right, let's continue B4. When we're looking at reinforcement contingencies, we want to go over quick common misconceptions about reinforcement. So one of the common misconceptions is reinforcement is a circular concept. No, it's not. It's linear. Think that ABC, right? Something happens before, then the behavior happens, and then there's a consequence. A common misconception is that people can be reinforced. And while we often will hear ourselves say this in the field, right? Like I'm reinforcing him. No, you're reinforcing the behavior. And that's really important to think about because only behavior is reinforced. Artificial reinforcement is a thing. No, if it's reinforcing, it's real. Also, practice is reinforcement. No, consequences are. Reinforcement is feedback. No, only if that feedback increases the behavior could you consider it reinforcement, right? So don't think of reinforcement as feedback unless it increases the behavior. Reinforcement is anything that a person likes. This is a huge one, right? Because let's go back to our previous example. I like water, but if somebody gives me water when my thirst is already quenched, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. I'm not going to be as excited about it. Like if I'm in the middle of a desert and I haven't had water for 5 to 6 hours and my tongue is dry, and somebody comes up to me and tells me to touch my nose and then reinforces me with a big glass of water, hell yeah, I'm going to keep touching my nose anytime they tell me to. But if somebody comes up to me when I have just finished my big Stanley of water and says, touch your nose, first touch your nose and then water, I'm going to be like, no. So just remember that, right? Like just because you like the reinforcer does not mean it's just because you like the thing does not mean it's a reinforcer. That's a big thing. It needs to increase the behavior. At the end of the day, that's what you need to remember. Reinforcement is only fun, is only something fun that we give the clients after a desired behavior. Sorry. No, again, you're thinking it's only if it increases the behavior, right? We can give our clients plenty of things that might not increase them doing something. We really need to focus in on, is it increasing the behavior? That's when it can be considered a reinforcer. The last misconception is reinforcement only strengthens the rate of responding. This is not true. It can also strengthen duration, latency, inner response time, magnitude, and topography. So yeah, those are just some common misconceptions about reinforcement and then the rebuttals to that. All right, let's move on to positive. I know this is pretty long, but let's move on to positive reinforcement now. So we're looking at, you'll see it written as reinforcement plus, type 1 reinforcement, SR plus. When a behavior is followed immediately by the presentation of an addition of a stimuli or stimulus, that increases the current future occurrence of that and similar behaviors under similar conditions. This is positive reinforcement, right? Did you hear that keyword addition? You're adding something to the environment to increase the behavior. Think plus, 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 plus. That is positive reinforcement, okay? Something desirable, access to social attention, tangibles, automatic reinforcement. This is going to increase that future behavior. That is going to be considered your positive reinforcement. It can be socially or automatically mediated. There are 5 categories of positive reinforcers: edible, activity, tangible, social, and sensory. The most important and widely used concept in ABA is positive reinforcement. Here's an example. Because hitting the mobile produced, it's the mobile. Because hitting the mobile produced a sound that the baby liked, the baby increased the hitting of the mobile. The mobile. Oh, I don't like that example. I would never say that. But let's think of another one. When you ring the bell, you get a cookie, right? You're going to keep ringing the bell if the cookie is reinforcing to you. Let's do a quick breakdown of that first one that we went over with the baby. Hitting the mobile is the behavior. The consequence is a pretty sound, something added, plus future, you're going to keep hitting the mobile to increase that pretty sound. On exam questions, look for an increase in the future behavior. Otherwise, it's not a reinforcement contingency. I think we went over this about 5 times now. I'll probably say it about 5 more times before we're done with the video. Let's quickly touch on what negative reinforcement contingency looks like. It's when a behavior follows immediately by the reduction or removal of a stimulus, which increases the future occurrence of that and similar behaviors under similar conditions, right? So we're looking at the reduction or the removal of a stimulus is key for negative. So this is going to look like negative plus, right? You're still increasing that behavior, making it reinforcement, but we're taking something away in these terms. The first thing I always think of when I think of negative reinforcement, because of me personally, is sound. I get really overstimulated when it's a loud environment. I also hate to hear people eat. I don't know, I know there's a word for it. I can't remember the name of it right now, but I would be heavily reinforced if I heard that and then it got taken away. Somebody took that away. I'd be like, whatever I have to do to make that keep happening, let's do that, because I can't stand hearing people eat. I don't like being in super loud environments. It's really tough for me. And I know a lot of my clients are like that as well. So it's really easy for me to kind of identify that for them and then negatively reinforce them when they're like putting on their headphones or asking for a break. I'm like, yes, immediately. Let's get them out of here. Let's remove you from this space, right? So that you can be reinforced, taking the sound away. Let's go over a quick example. After getting a painful sunburn, Claudia puts aloe vera on her skin, which relieves the pain. The next time she has a sunburn, she does the same thing. Now, I'm so glad this is the example because this one can trip people up. I think it would probably trip me up too because it sounds like something's being added here, right? So you're like, oh, okay, the aloe vera is getting added. This is positive reinforcement, but it's not. What we're focusing on is her painful sunburn and the aloe vera, which relieves the pain. So the pain is going away. So we're focusing on, okay, that relief that she's getting is the removal of the pain. That is a negative reinforcement. So we really have to break it down and think about it a little bit deeper than just like, oh, something got added, so this is positive reinforcement. No. What was causing her pain? The sunburn, and the sunburn pain gets removed from the aloe vera, meaning it's negative reinforcement. And then it goes on to say she does the same thing each time she gets burned. This is reinforcing the idea that it is reinforcement. All right, let's break the negative reinforcement contingency down just a little bit more, right? That behavior, rubbing the aloe vera on the sunburn, the consequence, relief from the pain, so something is removed, right? That negative. And then the future, rubbing aloe vera on sunburn increases. On test questions, look for scenarios that describe relief, escape, avoidance, or an increase in future behavior. The increase in future behavior is just going to account for the reinforcement, but look for that relief, escape, and avoidance. There's 2 types of negative reinforcement. There's escape and there's avoidance. And avoidance can be broken down into free operant avoidance and discriminated avoidance. We can touch more on those here in a bit. But yeah, those are just the 2 that we definitely want you to look out for. And then remember the 5 types of positive reinforcers you can remember as the acronym EATS, so EATSS, so 2 S's on the word EATS. E stands for edibles, A stands for activity, T stands for tangible, S stands for social, and the other S stands for sensory. Okay, and then we have the 2 types of negative reinforcement, escape and avoidance, and then avoidance gets broken down into discriminated avoidance and free operated avoidance. All right, let's talk about escape contingencies. When a behavior leads to the termination of an ongoing aversive stimuli or unpleasant situation, so this is a good thing. Think it's already happening, you need to get out of it, like turning down the volume of loud music, escape from loud music, maybe walking out of a boring lecture. It's super boring, so you're gonna walk away. It's already happening and you're needing to get out of it. So that's the escape contingency. When we're looking at the avoidance contingency, we are looking at a response prevents or postpones the presentation of an aversive stimulus or an unpleasant situation. So this is also a good thing. Sorry. Oh my gosh. It's more common than escape to have avoidance contingencies. It's like get away from it before it happens, right? Before it comes, what can we do to avoid this? And like we said earlier, there's 2 types of avoidance. There's discriminated avoidance, which is the contingency for responding, is the prevention of the onset of an aversive stimulus in the presence of a signal. So in other words, the arrival of a bad thing is signals. Think this is the warning. And then the avoidance behavior prevents the bad thing from ever occurring, okay? Here's an example of what that discriminated avoidance might look like. You have a traffic report that tells you the freeway you plan to take is especially congested. Not taking the freeway will result in avoiding the traffic, so you take a different route and avoid the traffic, right? The traffic report is the SD, or that warning that signals, hey, this is gonna be a longer drive today. And you go ahead and take a new route, so you're avoiding that altogether. You're not in it yet. It was a warning before it happened. Okay. Sorry for all the yawning. Oh my gosh. All right. When we talk about free operant avoidance, we talk about the contingency for responding is the prevention of the onset of an aversive stimulus without the presence of a signal, right? So we're not getting that warning this time. Responding can occur at any time during the interval prior to the scheduled onset of an aversive stimulus and therefore delays the presentation of an aversive stimulus. So in other words, this behavior prevents the bad thing from occurring, but without the signaled warning. Sorry, my throat is super dry. I'm going to take a quick drink. It makes my character look so funny because you can't see my water. Oh my gosh. All right, let's go over a quick example of free operant avoidance. Although living in Los Angeles means expecting freeway traffic at most times of the day, historically, it is worse between 4 and 7 p.m. Many LA natives do not take certain, especially congested freeways during that window of the time. They do not check on traffic, so there's no SD, and avoidance of the freeway is free to occur at any time during that 3-hour window. But they know, right? They know about the 4 to 7 window, and they're like, let me just choose something else. So there's no SD, there's no warning. They already know. To correctly discriminate between the types of avoidance, consider the presence of the SD, right? If an SD signals the availability of negative reinforcement, it's discriminated avoidance. If there's no such signal, like there's no SD, it's free operant avoidance, right? They have the choice. They're not being given any like warnings or signals that avoidance might be the best option. It's free operant. All right. That is all I have for B4. I'm gonna go ahead and move on to B5 in the next video.